we can do it. Oh. That was the first time I was asked to consent to be recorded. Did you guys get that too?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I guess we can start. I mean, we're just going to do the executive session minutes at this point. Ryan, would you do the honor of, does Gina, you take over? Or does that's you, right? Right, Brian? You did disclosure of executive.
So you got to close and seal.
You got to close and seal first. Okay, go ahead, Miss Picard.
I recommend that minutes pertaining to pending litigation, Town of Barrington versus et al. Versus State of Rhode Island remain sealed.
So moved.
Second, good. We had a motion to recommend the minutes pertaining to pending litigation was by Mr. Luzon, second by Ryan Callahan. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion? Okay. Anybody opposed? Any recusals or abstentions? George, okay, good. So that vote was unanimous. Oh, Catherine, do you want to?
You should be.
No, okay, thank you. Gina?
I recommend that minutes pertaining to potential litigation remain sealed.
So moved.
Thank you, Ryan. Recommendation was minutes pertaining to potential litigation remain sealed. Motion was made by Mr. Luzon, seconded by Mr. Callahan. Any discussion? Those in favor? Thank you. That's you. Anybody opposed? Recusal or abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous also. Thank you. Number 3.
I recommend that minutes which relate to the privacy of students and their records, approval of home instruction requests remain sealed.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. So recommend that the minutes relating to the private students and their records remain sealed. Was made by Mr. Luzon, seconded by Mr. Callahan. Any discussion? Those in favor? Anybody opposed? Abstentions or recusals? Votes unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Callahan, now you're on number 4.
All right, executive session votes, we had 4 votes. The first one was with respect to legal strategy. It was a unanimous vote. There was 9 in favor. Those in favor were Callahan, Chambers, Macruso, Luzon, Ligori, Lyle, Day, Abbott, and McAllister. The second vote was the approval of executive session minutes of May 11th. There were 7 in favor, 2 abstentions. Those in favor were Callahan, Chambers, Macruso, Luzon, Ligori, Day, and McAllister. The abstentions were Lyle and Abbott. The third vote was with respect to home instruction requests. It was 8 in favor with 1 abstention. Those in favor were Callahan, Chambers, Macruso, Luzon, Ligori, Lyle, Day, and McAllister. The abstention was Abbott. And the fourth vote was to return to open session. It was unanimous with 9 in favor. Those voting in favor were Callahan, Chambers, Macruso, Luzon, Ligori, Lyle, Day, Abbott, and McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Ms. Picard, Roman numeral 5, recognition.
So please join me in congratulating the following students. Postseason awards, high school girls volleyball, Jasmine Babbitt, first team all division. Casey Maston, second team all division, and Jenna Loring, third team all division. Congratulations, everyone.
Congratulations, great job. Thank you. Now it's time for public forum. This is for the general public for items that are not on the agenda. If you want to participate, we have to make you a panelist. So you would have to raise your hand, and if you raise your hand, I will see the little icon come up and we can allow you into the panelist room, I guess, as it says, so you can be allowed to speak. If you would like to speak, please state your name and try to keep your comments rather brief, maybe 2 to 3 minutes would be much appreciated. So if anyone has from the public would like to speak, please raise your hand now and I will be able to see you. I have that. I don't see anybody. Those of you who are calling in, I believe you have to hit *6, Ms. Picard, is that it? *6?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I see there's one phone caller person. If you want to speak, it's *6 on your phone. I don't see anyone from the public having their hand up, so I will suggest we move on to number 7, which is policy. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the policy for face masks and face coverings is before you tonight with a revision. I recommend approval of the revision to this policy as presented, and it has been reviewed by legal counsel.
Okay, I think I see a motion by Donna to approve the policy. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Mr. Luzon, second the motion. Let's open it up for discussion or questions. Ms. Chambers, you have your hand raised right away.
I do. I just, I'm guessing from reading the changes that you're, Gina, asking to make the decision of whether or not we retain the mask policy or let it go. Is that correct?
It's more to have the flexibility. An example would be, Donna, for example, our policy already talks about the interscholastic league and the fact that our athletes can conform to the guidelines. So for example, in baseball, the outfielders don't need to wear masks. The
Okay.
batter needs to wear a mask. So we already said that in the policy,
Okay.
but it doesn't allow for us to say, let's say for spectators who are socially distanced in writing. So it gives us the flexibility to say and provide, similar to like we're doing with close contacts, modify it based on the current parameters. So if we move into summer school, we move into ESY, we move into programs where we can have flexibility. Another example would be graduation with 1,400 students. They're coming out with new guidance this week that says that they can take their masks down as they cross the stage. So we wouldn't want to do anything that would hold us. So we could say and make shifts as needed based on current guidance.
Okay, so that said, and thank you for that answer. That said, I just had my first outing this weekend with the new guidelines. And the guidelines, for those of you that may not be aware of it, are that if you are vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask inside, okay? So I know people, because I was inside a store with people who I know are not vaccinated and did not wear masks. So it's basically up to the honesty of the individual. So my feeling is, and I know the kids are getting vaccinated all the time, that's continuing, but it's certainly in the elementary school, I would suggest that we retain the masks as much as possible. So I also had a conversation with someone that the retail stores are not going to enforce it. They're not going to ask people if they have been vaccinated. However, private businesses can ask if they're not vaccinated and require the mask. If we require the mask for a person that is not vaccinated and they refuse to put a mask on, we can not let them in. So, and I don't know if the Department of Health is saying that because their guidelines are very loosey-goosey about it. So considering ourselves as a business, I think that if we, for example, and I'm rambling and I don't mean to, but for example, Linda has alluded to the fact that we may be coming back to in-person meetings. And I would like to know before I do that everyone in that room has been vaccinated or wearing a mask or asked to leave if they're not wearing a mask and they haven't been vaccinated. At least ask the person that, have you been vaccinated if you're not wearing a mask? That's my recommendation. I think safety is important right now.
Chair, just one point of clarification. The masks will remain in schools for the remainder of the year. So the governor has specifically told everyone that masks in schools are required. So that's not ending this year. This is more about those after school events, like a graduation as an example, or spectators at a sporting event. And again, Donna, to your point, the guidance is, we're saying if you're vaccinated, it is the honor system, very similar to our travel policy, right? It's the honor system. We're hoping that people are honest about it. But if they're walking around, the masks should be on. It's when they're sitting or standing and they're socially distanced. And we're saying if vaccinated. Now, like to your point, we can't police, for example, at a graduation, 1,400 people. So we're asking that, it's the honor system.
But we can police ourselves at an open
Oh,
meeting.
yes,
too.
and they would be required anyway inside because we're a school building.
We
Okay.
have to wear them
okay.
anyways.
So I didn't realize that the school requirement has been extended. That's great news. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Mr. Callahan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify the school position. I think that's been touched on. I looked at the Department of Health RIDE and as well as CDC, and all three sites say that in school masks are to be maintained irrespective of the governor's position. So I understand that, as well as the social distance of 3 feet. So the change to the policy tonight is just to give the superintendent the authority, without coming back to us, to make adjustments to the mask policy as new information is coming in and we get some relief from the other mandates. Okay.
That's correct. Thank you, Ryan. That is correct. Any other questions or comments for the superintendent regarding the amended policy? I don't see any more, so I'll move it to a vote. There's been a motion and a second to approve the revisions to the face mask and face covering policy. Those in favor? Of the policy? Thank you. Those opposed? I don't see any abstentions or recusals? Okay, that was unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Ms. Picard, graduation dress code policy revision.
So this policy was revised by the Anti-Racism Task Force based on a conversation with the school committee back in March or April, I believe. And they're here tonight to speak about their thinking regarding the graduation policy dress. And I believe Dan Fitzgerald is going to be speaking on that. Eric, if you could move him up to
Panelist.
the panelist, that would be great. And I know John's on the line, and John's also available to discuss because he's reviewed as well.
Hello. Sorry about that. Couldn't get off mute. So hi, everyone. Great to see you all. As Superintendent Picard referenced in March, I believe the practices work group of the Anti-Racism Task Force was before you all. And as a part of those recommendations that were presented to you in their kind of draft form, it was requested that the graduation dress code that we referenced during those recommendations be something that we don't wait until everything else was finished and revisit next year when we have, a group of students graduating this year, that let's see if we can get this through. So that was brought back to the Anti-Racism Task Force. We received public input, and our working groups really worked on taking all of that into account and kind of putting that into practice. So what we have before you is a recommendation for some updates to the current policy that we found. So that was made available on in the school committee update. So that first page has the crossouts and the red text there to show some of the edits, and then there's that kind of clean version on that second page there. So this policy was originally adopted in 1999, and there was some information just because of the time that has lapsed since then that needed to be updated from there. And then other than that, we really took into account some of the things that maybe weren't captured in the policy and were more of practices of the district. So we tried to do this through a lens of considering what is, how do we make this as clear and concise to our students and our families, and also to our administration, our faculty who are having to enforce this, and making sure that it's enforceable. So I'm happy to, I don't know if you want me to read through it in its entirety, or just kind of answer some questions. But yeah, so as you'll see, just some general additions there to, bring the content up to kind of, being really clear. Something that wasn't in there before was mentioning the more specific about the cap and gowns, and also about the wearing of honor cords and things like that. You'll see the kind of biggest change there about talking about objects of cultural or religious significance is there in C, and it really does so through by just acknowledging current federal and state laws, and it gives 2 examples there. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dan. Miss Donna, you have your hand raised, and then Bill, you have your hand raised. So
Yes.
Ms. Chambers, you have the floor.
Dan, I think it's very clear. I think it's very good. It's inclusive. I would like an example of what would be something that a student would wear that would be of Indian or Native American on their gown or on their head or whatever.
Sure, and I believe that we do have some other members of the Anti-Racism Task Force as attendees, so feel free to raise your hand and jump in, as maybe better to answer this. But some of the examples that came up at the last Anti-Racism Task Force meeting was talking about, for example, eagle feathers as something that has significant cultural significance to our Indigenous friends and family and neighbors here, and having that adorned. But I believe I saw a hand. Oh, that was Lisa. But yep, so that would be an example if that's helpful.
Okay. And also, I don't even know what it's called, but I know at a lot of college graduations, Black students wear a certain sash that would be allowed also, I would think, as long as it's, appropriate. Yeah. So we're not limiting it just to the Native American additions. Okay.
Yep. So in that kind of way, the thoughts there from the committee were, I believe, kind of captured there in D. To your point, some honor cords or stoles, for students who earn those privileges, and that happens already in many different ways for students in armed forces or for honor cords and things like that. So, tried to be as inclusive as possible there. To your point.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Day, and then Ms. Macruso. Mr. Day, you have the floor.
Hey, this question is for John. I don't have issues with anything here. I just would like a little clarification. In E, it says if attire is disruptive. I'm just wondering, this is, who makes this decision? How, this seems to be a very, to me, an area that you could be challenged by, and I'm just concerned if that is the right phraseology to exclude somebody from going out in a graduation. If who makes that decision, and what kind of guidelines would they have? I guess that's the best way I can place it. So if Mr. Anderson could give me a little.
Sure. Mr. Day has hit the central issue right on the head. I cannot recommend to you that you approve this policy. While I believe it was very well intended, the concern that I have is exactly what Mr. Day said. You are putting your superintendent and your school principals, particularly the high school principal, in an untenable position, because essentially they are going to be put in the position of saying that is religious, that's cultural, that's not religious, that's not cultural, that's disruptive, that's not disruptive. And there's an expression, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What I may think is very wonderful and appropriate, such as a particular religious symbol, might be indeed very hurtful and offensive to somebody who, for example, is active in the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That is somebody who is, an atheist and very proud of their position in the community as an atheist, and advocates for atheism. Likewise, There are people in Charahoe. I think it's been kind of obvious in the last few months as this dialogue has continued. And this is a very, this is the hard work of school committees that you're engaging in, and it's the hard work of the anti-racism task force. And everybody should be complimented for taking on that hard work. But there are people in this community who would consider a Black Lives teacher to be disruptive. There are people in this community who would consider the Confederate flag to be disruptive. And I really do not believe that it is the role of Gina Picard to stand literally at the gate at graduation and say, take that off. That can go, that can't go. It's just an untenable position for her to be in. So I think that the school committee has two choices. One is that you treat students uniformly. And indeed, the choice, you can choose between a green and white gown. I think it's a very good provision in this policy. Everybody can choose green, everybody can choose white, but we're not going to have people who choose orange, or black, or white, but black or yellow. That is something that is neutral. It doesn't make a difference in terms of what your viewpoint is, with regard to that. But putting the superintendent in the position of her making these calls. And the reality of the situation is at graduation, and I have been to enough graduations. I'm very proud of the fact in 11 years on the school committee in Pawtucket, I went to 22 out of 22 graduations. These events happen. The choice that you have to make, therefore, is, do you allow people to, as long as they have a green or a white gown, express themselves in any way they see fit, and it's not the superintendent's role to play censor, or you maintain a graduation where people don't import cultural or religious items that some people will say will disrupt, other people will say not disrupt. I will distinguish between cords that are issued by the school. That's a recognition by the school. So that is not the same as I'm making a decision. The school has a policy. The policy affects everybody. If you make the National Honor Society, you get to wear a particular cord. If you, if you're going into the government service in the terms of the military, you can wear your uniform. That's open to everybody. It's not a situation where the superintendent is deciding, I like the Army, I don't like the Navy. So again, I think there's some good parts of this policy. I think the, what you can wear under your gown part of the policy is very well done, but I just can't recommend putting the superintendent in that position.
Thank you, John. Lisa, and then Ryan.
Can I follow up?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Mr. Day, go ahead.
Again, as I've said many times here, I've been around here a long time, and I have no recollection. I think I missed one graduation and all the years I've been on the school committee, and I have no recollection of we ever having a problem. I know in the past there had been some young ladies that have walked across that stage with Indian apparel on. So I don't know that that's this big of a problem. And if John can come up with some way to take care of number 5, number E there, I don't think I'm getting the opinion that he doesn't think there's any way to do it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't tweak it, but again, I would like someone to turn around and tell me that I'm wrong, that we have had incidences where we have denied someone from graduating here at Charahoe, whether it be at the football soccer field, that's how far back I go, or at the Ryan Center. It just hasn't been a problem, and I'm just concerned that this disruptive thing could wind us in court somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Ms. Macruso, Mr. Callahan, Ms. Chambers, and then Mr. Luzon. Ms. Macruso, you have the floor.
So we knew that bringing this policy, it's our first time proposing a policy, the anti-racism task force, that this was going to be a complicated conversation. Everyone is committed to having it. So I want you to know that the anti-racism task force was prepared for this. Also, John has taken the time to review this policy, provided feedback. That feedback was given to me, in turn to the committee, and some things were actually reduced from this policy that had been intended to be in here, and other aspects of this, the anti-racism task force said, no, we're going to stand for people of color in this community and bring it forward for deliberation here. So thank you, John. We know that you've spent time thinking about this very carefully, and you're acting in the best interest of the district. However, with that being said, I'm going to address each of these points backwards. So to Mr. Day's point, please watch the meeting rather than spend the next 25 minutes giving you all of the examples that were offered at that meeting by the Narragansett tribe. Watch the meeting. There have been several issues that have been disruptive to our students. However, they have not risen to the level of school committee. And that's part of our work in anti-racism, right? Is not assuming that the world that we see through our lens is the world as it is for all. So that meeting, please, it's on record. And Donis, Thon, Carla, they give specific examples. So they do exist, and this is an issue. Now, to the issue about D&E, that actually, if you look at the policy, if you look at C, that was our policy. I mean, I'm sorry, that is our policy. So if you reject this policy in its entirety, which I don't think you'll do the entire policy down, but look at C. It actually put more burden on Gina or the superintendent. It said students without proper attire. And remember, proper attire meant if you showed up in sneakers, if you couldn't afford nice shoes, that was not proper attire in our existing policy. You were actually not even, you were, quote, turned away. Their diplomas removed. That is actually our policy. E tries to take all of that away to say, we're not going to not let our children graduate. But if something is, disruptive, they have to be asked to change versus look at what exists. Not even allowed, turned away. So the anti-racism task force was trying to do better. If you want to make a motion to strike it completely, I don't think you'll have any pushback from the task force. They were actually trying to get at not turning our kids away entirely, which is C. So please just take a moment to really process that. I believe the task force will support striking it all together. Now, lastly, to the idea of cultural items versus religious items. The reason why C bullet 2 is included is actually because of the education that John provided us, which was that religious items such as yarmulkes and hijabs are protected under the First Amendment. However, those are just so well known to the greater society that nobody would ever think to tell somebody to remove them in a ceremony. But the actual lived experience of our students over the past several decades has been that when beaded stoles or eagle feathers are in possession or on the students, there have been students who've been told to take them off, and sometimes they've even been touched, which is considered extremely offensive because those are not cultural items only. They do have religious significance, but it's not been understood to be that way. It's been interpreted by, the majority to be a cultural item. But what we're trying to clarify here to protect the district, but also be inclusive, is that there is this other federal law that says specifically, if you read this law, It protects the religious rights of our indigenous population because society does not assume that those items are religious, and it corrects for that. By including it in this policy, we're helping educate our community and our teachers and our staff that these items need to be considered and protected in addition to a yarmulke, a hijab, or a gold cross, whatever it may be. So that's the thinking there. And in terms of the African Honor Societies, if the school needs to recognize an African American Honor Society in order for a Black student to wear that, okay, that's consistent with this as well. That's perfectly fine. And the last thing I'll say is I really want to compliment the non-gendering of this policy. Look at what they did. Look at how they updated the language from dress to attire, how they helped our socioeconomically challenged students be included, because you can wear sneakers, but also in terms of disability, what if sneakers are the best thing for your feet? What if that's what your body needs? Perhaps boots. They did such good work in so many aspects of this. So I implore you, make a motion, make an amendment, let's revise it, but let's give our students at this graduation the right and the protection to cross the stage with their indigenous items on their person without risk of them being told to be removed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. Mr. Callahan, and then Ms. Chambers. Mr. Callahan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. I guess my take on this was pretty much what Bill's was in terms of a concern. I would need a rewrite and legal support to make sure that we don't put Superintendent Picard into a precarious position. I don't think that that's a fair thing. I do like the changes to the attire. I don't really see any issues there. So I like the front part of it, but everything else, I'd like to see some correction before I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Ms. Chambers, and then Craig, and then Gary.
Yeah, let me agree with Lisa's comments, and I think the opportunity should be there for students to wear what they feel proud of if it demonstrates their culture. But here's my recommendation. It will put a slighter burden on Gina and the administration, but if a student wants to wear eagle feathers or a beaded stole on their gown, I think it could be pre-approved, and if it is appropriate, it's not everybody can just go out and wear eagle feathers because they think it looks cool. Okay, I think it has to be appropriate to those that it is appropriate for, to honor their heritage. Okay, and I would say that I think I would support that for sure. There was another point I was going to make. Approved and appropriate, I think, is important. And I also think that there can be a list or specific examples, like if the student says, this is the beaded stole I would like to wear, I am a member of whatever tribe, this is what I like to wear, and the administration approves it, that would be fine with me. If you are not a member of the Honor Society, you cannot just make up a cord and put it on and look like you're a member. It has to be appropriate to the individual graduate. So I think that we could probably honor the students and support the students that want to demonstrate eagle feathers. I think that's great. Anyway, that's my point, and I would support it. And I don't think there needs to be any consequences unless the student has not had it pre-approved or it's appropriate.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah.
Mr. Luzon?
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm muted. Am I?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
All right. Donna, boy, great minds think alike. So with that being stated, I agree with 100% with what Donna elaborated. First of all, I think you guys did a great job. But I agree with John also. E really kind of muddies the water, even though C, the deleted C wasn't pretty either. So how about going to the red C that we see as red and putting the word after welcomes, pre-approved recognized objects of cultural and religious significance, and put some verbiage in elaborating that if they don't get it pre-approved, that administrators will have to deal with it. So how does that sound, folks?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Luzon. Mr. Legore, you were not up next. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, I think you guys did a great job with this. I happen to oversee commencement at URI for my entire college. We've never had a dress policy. We've never told students what they can or can't wear. Students who, for instance, don't make the honor roll, don't make up a cord to look like the honor roll. At the same time, the controversies we've had are so minor and inconsequential that across the campus, and I've probably been to 60 or 75 university commencements, there's never, ever been a problem that I'm aware of. I just feel like we need to let the students celebrate who they are. I think having a pre-approval process continues to create bias and potential for discrimination. And I mean, I can go on. I do have concerns with item E. I think the two statements in item E are not consistent with each other. You know, and it's maybe being a little pedantic, but the first part is if it's disruptive, corrective action could be taken. That could occur after commencement, where someone could say, hey, you should have never done that on the stage, right? The second statement is a little different. It says if attire is inappropriate, which I believe gets into a highly subjective, judgmental process at that point. I'm not making a motion yet, but I would scrap that entirely. But I just feel like this is their one chance. Students in high school or college, more than anything at commencement, want to walk across the stage. I can tell you that from direct experience. They want to walk across the stage. They want to celebrate. We spend the hours leading up to commencement in awe of how they've decorated their caps, what the beauty of their gowns look like. And you know, if every one of them want to wear feathers, so what at the end of the day? So what? They get the chance to go across the stage. And personally, I just don't see any harm. I think the more we allow them to be who they are, the more likely we'll have very few problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Legore. Ms. Giusti, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gary. I think that if we have a pre-approval process, who is going to prove that something is or is not culturally relevant to someone else, and what's the approval process going to be? We run the risk with this policy that you could see a Confederate flag, which is offensive to some of us, but not at all to others. You could see a whole host of things, but it sounds like we're at a low risk for that. And maybe we need to trust the students just a little bit more and trust that they're going to be, if they're there to walk across the stage, it's because they're proud of their accomplishments and maybe are less likely to cause a scene. It's a tricky policy. I am not comfortable with the fact that John is uncomfortable with it. But I think you've done great work, and I love that you've taken the gender specific clothing out of it. I love that you made some here. So maybe I would ask John, is there something that you would remove that would make you more comfortable? And Lisa and Dan, you can jump in if you already know. I didn't watch the meeting, so I apologize if it was said at that meeting.
Here's what my suggestion is that first of all, I do not support the pre-approval. All that is doing is, instead of Gina standing at the gate at graduation, Gina's, sitting in her office and kids are lining up to, have Gina thumbs up or thumbs down beforehand. That's just moving the timing of the problem. So I do not support the pre-approval recommendation. I think that the school committee, it would be helpful if the school committee gave some guidance in general terms tonight, and that once I have a better understanding of what the sentiment of the school committee is, that I can then try to craft something as best I can that fits what you're looking for. And I'm going to talk about I will give you a tale of two graduations. Again, I've told you before that I attended graduations as a member of the Pawtucket School Committee. Pawtucket has two high schools. The two high schools are very, very different in terms of graduation. The high school that has historically been less diverse has a graduation very similar to what Gary described, and that is people can express themselves, people can wear whatever they want. One year somebody wore nothing under their gown. It is, for lack of better terms, and I think Gary may have used this word, a celebration. By contrast, the other high school in Pawtucket, which is the more diverse high school of the two, the graduation is a very traditional. Everybody wears, their gown. People do not decorate. People are expected, for example, to wear shoes. And by the way, the administration comes with shoes and comes with everything, so that everybody, when they walk out on the football field, looks, presentable. Because frankly, at that high school, for many of the students, they are the first person in their family ever to graduate from high school. And it is it's a ceremony, not a celebration. And I think that's perhaps the best way to distinguish the two. I think that the school committee needs to give some guidance in terms of, is the school committee looking for a ceremony or a celebration? Once you give that guidance, I can take it from there. If you're looking for a ceremony is something that frankly you have had in Charahoe in the past. It's very traditional and it's very easy to enforce because everybody, doesn't, decorate mortarboards and doesn't decorate gowns and so forth. And indeed, they have spare gowns at Shea High School on hand that if somebody shows up, it's like, nope, you need to change into what's appropriate. And it's very clear ahead of time what people are expected. Alternatively, the committee could say that, no, we would prefer to do it as celebration, which is the way Tolman High School does it in Pawtucket. And then I can draft something that essentially is people can wear whatever they are comfortable with. As Catherine correctly indicated, there may be some people who choose to wear items or put on their mortarboard or put on their stole items that may be of cultural significance to them, but not be offensive to all of us. And Catherine used the example of the Confederate flag. And personally, I consider the Confederate flag to be offensive. On the other hand, it is not my place to tell other people what they can, if it's anything, if it's a celebration, it's not my place, and it's certainly not the superintendent's place to say, I like your culture, I don't like your culture. So I think what would be really helpful from the school committee would be a direction. Is that you're looking for a ceremony? Or are you looking for a celebration? And that's an oversimplification, but once you tell me that, I will sit down with the superintendent. I will sit down with anybody on the school committee, but less than a quorum for the open meetings purposes, and try to craft something that reflects what the body thinks. I do not think it is appropriate to sit here and try to wordsmith, in this environment. I'm not prepared to do it tonight. I don't think that fast. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, Chair. Thank you, John. Okay, Lisa Macruso and Donna Chambers are school committee members. They have their hands raised, but we also have Andrea Spaz in the waiting room would like to speak. Do you want to, Lisa, you have the floor, and then Donna, and I'd like Andrea to come in and Ms. Spaz to come in and speak.
And Dan, Dan's also had his hand.
I saw his hand too. I usually give school committee members a chance to speak first.
So our next school committee meeting is after graduation. And we need to consider the weight of that right now. I also feel like we need to understand that if we don't revise this policy, the one in black is the policy. So it's the more restrictive, more exclusive policy that actually requires Dina to turn students away. So it's difficult to wordsmith something right now. And I actually really want John to do exactly what he just offered to do. But I think there has to be an in-between bounce. I think there has to be a now and a then, because we're not going to see each other again until after our students graduate. So to move it forward and to provide John with the insight and feedback that he's looking for, as well as to try to protect as many students as we can at this time. There's no motion on the floor, correct, Donna?
Correct.
Okay.
There's no motion yet.
Thank you. So with that intention in mind, a hop, skip, and a jump, and to not have all this black language as our policy, I make a motion.
Wait a minute, I misspoke. There was a recommendation. We're in discussion right now. So there was a recommendation to approve the policy. We're in discussion. Yes.
Thank you. I make a motion to amend the policy by striking all of the black language of C, as well as the second sentence of E. Okay, I'll repeat that for you, Donna. I make a motion to amend the dress code for graduation ceremony policy by striking all of letter C in black and the second sentence of letter E.
Second sentence.
I believe that was Mr. Ligoria's concern, that second sentence.
Okay. I don't know. I think maybe I'm sorry, Lisa, that's fine. That's a motion. I would think you'd want to keep the second sentence and get rid of the first one, like Gary's point was.
Oh, did I?
Well, the first sentence has something, a prerogative to take corrective action. He made a point that it could be after graduation.
No, Lisa is correct.
Lisa's correct. Thank you. Then I apologize. Okay, so
needs a second or we can't discuss it.
Okay, we need a second. Okay, there's a second by Donna to amend the policy as Lisa has stated and written. Now I open that open to discussion. Any other? Donna, you have the floor.
Excuse me, I'm not seeing. I don't think I have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we always made a motion and then we discussed it.
Yeah, but I think Dan began speaking on it and I think we went right into discussion before anybody was ready to make a motion.
Donna is correct.
Donna, thank you for keeping us honest. Okay, so make your motion. Now you can make it.
Amendment, Chair.
Right.
And I reassert that the school committee adopt the dress code for graduation ceremony with the exception of all of the black language of C and the second sentence of E.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you, Lisa. Now I understand. Okay. Lisa made the motion. Donna seconded. Okay, thank you. Now we can have we can open up for that recommendation or that for a discussion. Okay, Donna, you have your hand raised. Gary has his hand raised.
Yes, I'm comfortable with Lisa's motion. I just wanted to say that I don't know whether John can do it before graduation or whatever, but we have to approve it tonight. I would be uncomfortable with any political signage or symbol whatsoever. A Confederate flag would be political. Someone going with a big Q on their chest, that would be political and offensive. So I would just say that we have to leave politics out of the whole thing. And that would be an exclusion as opposed to, it's an exclusion. But to Lisa's point, let's let this fly for this year, and we may have to amend it next year if we see students that are abusing it. All right.
Thank you, Donna. Gary, you have the floor.
Can I defer to Dan for a moment so he has the opportunity?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, and I'm merely a representative from the larger anti-racism task force, and again, thank you for this space and taking such thoughtful consideration into what this does mean for our BIPOC students. But I did want to touch upon two things really quickly. First, I think to the sentiment of John so nicely put about this being kind of a ceremony or celebration. I think, again, if anybody is able to go back and watch our last meeting, some of our members and members of the public said it so much more perfect than I can right now, but really talking about how this really is a celebration for our Indigenous students, and just thinking that we are just a generation or two away from the boarding schools that really work to literally rip away the very culture that we're talking about, of being able to adorn our caps and gowns with. So it's not, a far past. It's not this history. It's really with our parents and grandparents of our Indigenous, friends, families, and students. So just to, thinking about really this is, and I think that's why everybody is taking this so seriously, that this is a very significant event for all of our students, but, especially since, we're knowing lower graduation rates for some of our Indigenous students, and really celebrating this accomplishment for what it is, and in an institution that historically hasn't been as celebratory for those students in very, very recent past. So if you can, go back and watch that, I don't think I did that justice, but certainly watch that, and I think hear that account about what this really does mean to our BIPOC students and families. The other thing I did want to, touch base on, and the original recommendation from the practices work group to the anti-racism task force, before getting some kind of thoughts and feedback, actually did not have section E. Section E was then, based on some conversations at that meeting, was really talking about trying to make sure that this also aligned with other current policies. So E is actually currently almost verbatim the dress code that's currently on page 26 in the student handbook, as written, the high school student handbook in Charahoe. So that language there was kind of added towards the end of our conversations as a way to try to align this with current policy already there. So, to the point of, I think that Lisa was making and others making about kind of, where the policy is now, I think that may be some just helpful information of that currently is the dress code, not just about not graduation dress code that we're talking about tonight, but the full dress code that is written in every handbook that our students carry around, if that's helpful at all. But thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Liguori?
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest a motion before Lisa beat me to the punch, but in the unprecedented times we've had, I thought maybe this was an unprecedented move to just simply suspend the dress code for this year and then revisit it, giving our time crunch. But that's fine. There's a motion on the board that I'm generally okay with. I guess one is a clarification question. So Lisa's motion, I'm not really sure what it's asking about item C in black, because what we have in front of us, it's already crossed out. So I just need some clarification on what you're asking on that item.
Chair, is that okay?
Yes, go ahead, please, Lisa.
Yeah, Gary, right. So that is our current policy.
So let me just maybe re-ask my question. Are we adopting everything in red other than E, second part of E?
Yes, well said. Yes, feel free to amend my motion. I will second yours.
I have one other item. and I don't want to get into the wordsmithing, John, but I do believe this is important on item 2 on the second bullet point. It says the first sentence says the green and white cap and gown provided by the district. The next line says the cap and gown that they purchase and wear. So are they purchasing them or is the district providing them? I think that should be made clear.
I can clarify that. That is meant to say as suggested because the district gets to determine the colors. And the anti-racism task force is not asking for that to be changed.
No, I'm not sure that was, my question is, do the students purchase the cap and gown or does the district provide the cap and gown?
The students purchase it.
Okay, well, I think those two lines are contradictory then. It says graduates must wear a green or white cap and gown as provided by the district. That implies the district is giving it to them.
Yes, what I'm saying is that word should be, and what the task force, I believe, meant was as suggested. The green or white cap and gown as that should say suggested. Because the district gets to choose the color scheme.
Gotcha.
They don't get to choose the gender.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, if you want to make those amendments to my amendment, I will back them, Gary.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we amend Lisa's motion to say we're adopting the policy that is all in red other than item E.
I don't have do I have a second?
Excuse me, Gary,
Yeah,
did you want to change that one word as well?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, but the addition, change the
Provided to suggested.
provided to suggested.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Donna.
Second.
Yeah, Linda McAllister seconded, Lisa. Okay, now that new recommendation, we're open for discussion. So it looks like I have, Bill Day, may I have?
Can I just make a suggestion that Lisa,
Yes,
her motion, because this is really an amendment to her motion. This
I
is
know.
motion. So if Lisa pulls her original motion and the second gets pulled, he can make this a motion. It's not an amendment.
Okay. Right. Lisa, can you pull yours, please? Make it all.
Absolutely. I withdraw my amendment, my motion to amend.
Okay, and then who, I
No,
don't remember. No, Lisa, yours wasn't a motion. Yours was the original motion to,
Draw my motion.
thank you. And I don't remember who seconded that. I didn't write it down.
Donna.
Donna seconded it.
Thank you, Donna.
Donna's pulling the second. Thank you, Donna.
Ping pong back to Gary.
Now we're back to Gary. You guys are I'm bouncing. I feel like a ping pong ball today.
So I restate my motion or restate a motion?
No, I think Donna has it. I
Okay.
think she has it. She just wanted to make sure you put that word suggested in. And then we had a second by Linda McAllister. Now I'm open for discussion. Mr. Day, may I have Mr. Anderson speak first and then I'll let you speak? Is that okay? Can you give me a thumbs up? Thank you, sir. Mr. Anderson?
Sure.
John?
Yeah, I'm going to continue to recommend that you don't approve the policy as amended. The biggest concern that I have is that it still includes the language religious and cultural, recognized religious and cultural objects. I don't know who, is Gina Picard the person who does the recognizing? Does Gina go to a book? Does Gina have somebody stand next to her and say yes, no? I think that, Mr. Day and Mrs. Giusti had said it very well, that there may be people who choose to wear items that they feel is culturally appropriate but is perhaps very unpopular. Just like it was in the Anti-Racism Task Force has documented inappropriate attitudes towards Native Americans at graduation in the past based on what the majority wants. The committee runs the risk of doing exactly what the committee is attempting to rectify from the past. If you're going to go in the direction that of letting students express themselves, I It is incredibly problematic. It puts the superintendent in a no-win position if she's going to have to decide what is a recognized cultural and religious item. If you want to go this direction, then go the direction that Mr. Liguri referred to at URI, where students can essentially do what they wish at graduation. I actually would keep E in because it is part of the dress code. And if somebody comes to the graduation, and frankly, as happened at one of the high schools in Pawtucket, came with nothing under their gown, the school can address that particular circumstance. Because I think that raises a lot of other concerns. But this language where Gina's going to be the school censor and she's going to have her helpers, Mr. McKenzie and Mrs. Boz, it puts them in a no-win position. And I'm going to be very frank. If Gina calls me and says, with regard to graduation, there's a kid in line and he's, wearing a stole made out of the Confederate flag, I'm going to tell Gina that based on the First Amendment, if you're letting other people go through with stoles, then you can't single out, and that may be very offensive. But again, the First Amendment protects people's rights to be offensive. And what is offensive today, what is not offensive today was offensive in Charahoe in years past. So I really think, based on what Catherine said, what Bill said, what Gary described at URI, that you really need to take that language out. And I actually would like to see E left in. I don't feel as strongly about that. I mean, there are laws against, there are other ways that the superintendent can deal with people who, come that are disruptive. The superintendent has other ways to do it. We have, a police officer present at graduation for a reason. But having the superintendent pick and choose, I don't want anybody on this committee to complain if, gee, Gina, why didn't you pull out the person who, wore that big, photograph of a fetus, or who wore a Make America Great hat, or who wore, Native American eagle feathers. It's not, if we're going to go this route, which is the committee's prerogative, you have a right to do this, but you got to be consistent about it. So the other thing I will say is, yes, I do not like drafting something as important like this, in the way that we are doing it. I will offer you the option, obviously, is that we do have some time between now and graduation. Gina, what's the date of graduation?
June 11th.
We have, we have 17 days, and, the committee can meet a week from today and have a document in front of them that, I can better advise you as to what the concerns are than doing it on the fly the way that we are doing it right now. This just makes me very uncomfortable that somebody is going to say, wait a minute, my religious item, my culture wasn't recognized here. I'm an atheist and I want to wear my I don't believe in God button. And I wasn't allowed to do that. Or that people on the committee will be upset with Gina or the community and say, Gina, why didn't you pull that Confederate flag out of the, you should have stopped that. You should not have allowed that girl to graduate. We got to be consistent about this, and we got to do it right. So again, I'm really suggesting that you table this tonight. We have 17 days. I'm asking for 7 of them to come back and do it. I would be very curious, Gary, if there is a written policy at URI. The way URI does it does not get you into legal problems. It changes the culture and the activity if that's the direction the school committee wants to go. But it is a risk-free one. The policy that you're writing right now is an invitation for problems if Gina enforces it. But there are also problems when people say to Gina, why didn't you enforce it?
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We have a Mr. Day, then Catherine, then Ryan, and I'd still would like to get Ms. Spaz in at some point. She's had her hand up. Mr. Day, you have the floor.
Oh, yeah, two quick things. We're talking about striking everything in red and stuff like that. Well, if you turn the page over and look on the back there, it tells you, I think there would be a cleaner way for people to make a decision. If they look on the other side, it says the revisions are approved to this is how the policy will read. Instead of worrying about what's read on the other side of it or whatever. And the second thing is, as I said earlier, I think I missed one graduation here in like 20 years. And I would like Mr. Fitzgerald, Dan Fitzgerald, to turn around and tell me any personal situations where he felt someone was discriminated against, because I, one, will turn around and tell you, I have never seen it. I have never heard about it. We all of a sudden are trying to solve a problem that I'm maintaining that I have no personal knowledge of, and certainly people have no problem telling me what's wrong with this district. And Dan Fitzgerald can turn around and tell me that he's been involved in the Charahoe community here since graduation and prior to graduation, what he has seen and why he is advocating so much for this policy. What's turned him off about what we've been doing here for the past 50 years or so. I'm not saying we've been perfect, but I'll tell you right now, I have not seen anyone denied graduation because of their dress or attire. We've had kids that didn't graduate because they didn't follow the rules and regulations and do their schoolwork and get certified to get a diploma. But we're trying to do something that I think is not as big a deal as it's being made out to be. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Catherine, you have the floor. Catherine Giusti.
Yeah, I would like to see no policy.
Okay.
Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. No policy now ever, Catherine, or just for this time around and come back?
Maybe just for this year, given that, you know, things are the way that they are. But I also think that, you know, we're raising students to trust students. We're raising them to walk away from Charahoe and be productive adults. And maybe this is a nice first step in giving them some independence to graduate without a policy like this in place.
Thank you, Catherine. Ryan, then Linda McAllister. Then I'd still like to get Andrea Spaz on. Ryan, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm leaning a lot towards where Catherine's at on that statement. I do think we need some language, right? Because we have caps and gowns, so we have to have some prescribed uniform. But if you kept A, as Bill had commented, how it's cleaned up, the cleaned up version, looking at that one, not the red letter one. But if you keep A, B, strike the first half of the first bullet and add a third bullet that says caps and gowns can be decorated, get rid of C and D, and then keep E. You have this prescribed uniform. You allow for individuals to express themselves, and you get the administration out of policing that expression. It's the same thing as getting rid of it altogether. And, you know, I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you very much. Linda McAllister.
Thank you. I did, mine's pretty simple, and I like Catherine's suggestion, and I like Ryan's. I like the whole conversation, but the more the conversation goes on, the more kind of uncomfortable I get with the direction that we could go. What about if we just kept A and B and let the kids go with that? We have a policy on dress, and I would think that would flow over into this, but keep it simple and see what they do. And like Catherine says, this is such a strange year. Let's let them celebrate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So we have Gary's original recommendation or proposal. I'd like the committee to hear from Ms. Boz. She has been waiting. I think I can allow her to talk, so I'm going to try and see if, okay, she's coming in. Okay, Ms. Boz, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for waiting.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. First, I just want to commend the Anti-Racism Task Force for their work on this. It's clear that a lot of thought and time went into developing this. I do just want to share a couple of things in terms of my perspective as the future high school principal and the current assistant principal. I would like to share that I like the piece about the gender being specific and that being removed. I think that's a strong direction to move in. I like that that's not specific to a gender. I like that graduates have the opportunity to reserve the right to choose which color cap and gown they wear to the ceremony. But I support John Anderson's recommendation specifically around E as well. And I think I would defer to John Anderson in terms of his specific comments he's made regarding the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boz. We do have a number, if I don't have any more committee members, there are some members of the public that would like to speak. I would bring them in one by one. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Abbott, do you want to say something before I allow the public to come in?
Have you asked the student government about their opinion? The student council or whatever it's called.
Okay, Ms. Boz, do you have an answer to Mr. Abbott's question about the students' thoughts or?
No, it has not been brought to the level of the students as it's before you first right now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to leave you in, Andrea, just in case there's more questions. Leave you in as a panelist. I'm going to allow Caleb Grant to come in next. Caleb, you have the floor.
Yes, yeah, I'm Caleb Grant. I'm from Hopkinton, and I'll just be brief. You guys are doing great work. I would fully support the move towards simplicity, echoed by a lot of the committee members, and I would also really support the idea of this being kind of a jump year. And I completely defer to John and all of Mr. Anderson and all of the legal matters, but I do like the direction that Mr. Ligori was going in terms of anything being seen as inappropriate could be addressed after the fact. I know there is some concern about freedom of speech offending people on all sides and from all backgrounds, but I think if we are moving as a school committee towards having a permanent task force on equity and inclusion, there can certainly be more, I believe as part of that, there will be more opportunities for people to talk about culturally offensive or religiously offensive events. So if someone who is not Narragansett wears a beaded stole as an offensive joke towards the community, after the ceremony, that could be addressed with people of the tribe and talk, there'll be places to have those discussions. Ditto for somebody wearing a Confederate flag or somebody, wearing a cross in a mocking way who's actually an atheist. Those will be offensive, but I think shying away from the chance of offensive behavior doesn't move us forward. I think moving forward with more expression and more conversation is how to get to the right place. But thank you so much for all of your work, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Thon Harris, I'm going to move you allowed to talk. Hello? Are you there?
I think you're trying to let me back in, but I'm going to mute myself again so you can let the next person in.
Oh, okay. Oh, I must have lost.
I think it might be Thon. Thon, are you in line?
It is Thon. Are you on, Thon?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I just want to apologize for checking in a little late. I had some things going on here. Second, thank you to the school committee for listening to us and for everyone for keeping an open mind. We realize that we are not lawyers, and I think our goal when we were putting this together was for students to have the best experience possible. And I just want to comment, so growing up in the Cheraho school system, graduating from Cheraho, I did graduate. I did have eagle feathers on my cap, as well as my wife. My wife also did have beadwork on the outside of her gown. And us two really didn't face any adversity. However, when my brother was graduating, Hunter Harris, a few years after me, he was told like that was not appropriate dress, and he could not wear these things. He eventually did anyway. He snuck them in and wore them inside and did not face a further issue from there. But I think when we really wanted to word in the policy, things like, these eagle feathers and beadwork, these things hold such a significant and important role in our daily life. We pray with them. They are gifted during very special occasions like a graduation, at birth, things like that. And there's so much meaning behind them. When we dance with these feathers in ceremony, if one should happen to fall off and touch the ground, we have a whole nother ceremony just to retrieve it off the ground, in which veterans who have fought for our country are the ones to retrieve it. So there is a lot, and I don't want to hold everyone's time with speaking on the relevance, but there are plenty of cases throughout the country where school officials or teachers have taken these items right off of students' caps, and only federally recognized Indigenous people or tribe are able to obtain eagle feathers to have them legally. And what we were trying to do is protect any situation like that in which these things would be kind of desecrated, and to create these situations that once it's done, it's kind of hard to take back for. I can't imagine someone having the same good feeling from that feather that was like ripped from them in such a manner. It wouldn't hold the same significance. So that's kind of what we were thinking. I don't foresee a problem if it's the language is toned down and more vague, as long as these things with the understanding that they're on. We just kind of we wanted to ensure that there were protections for students. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Maya Hill, I'm going to allow you to talk. Ms. Hill?
Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Hi, you have the floor.
Okay, a couple of things. Obviously, Thorne went ahead of me, so he naturally touched on exactly what I wanted to make sure that we got across. Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you very much, Lisa, for going ahead of us and conveying what we discussed in our meeting. I really hope that each and every one of you do go back and watch the meeting, because you will have a better understanding. I don't believe that in any 2-3 hour meeting, you will be able to understand the importance that this is to us. When the attorney was speaking regarding it being a celebration, it is a celebration, and it is in present memory as to why it's a celebration to us, why it's important to us. And it is, while it's refreshing to know that when it comes to questions regarding gender, Everybody is very inclusive and understand that it took years to get to that point. We've been here longer than that, and it's still not understood, and it's still being dealt with in a legal matter where this is not a legal issue. So I understand that it would be impossible for if the entire tribe came on here and spoke and tried to explain to you the importance of this and the fact that it's not just a symbol, what it means to us. And Mr. Day, my son graduated from Cheraho. My brother brought his feather back to him before he walked, and it was taken off of his hat so that he could not wear it. So I don't know if that was the graduation that you missed, but it did happen, and it happened while they were lined up in the auditorium at URI. And as Dawn stated, we're just trying to prevent these things happening to our future generations, because it's our duty to our future generations to ensure that they get further than we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Let's see, Carla Harris, you have your hand up. You're allowed to talk. Yes, Mr. Abbott, I see you. I'll have you up next. I just allowed Ms. Harris to come in. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
So while I'm okay with, I guess, simplifying the policy that we drafted, I want everyone to keep in mind that your original policy was very, very vague. And with that being said, the issue wasn't necessarily with the policy, but with the practice that these children were being told, no, they couldn't wear their cultural clothes or whatever stoles that they were given. So I want to keep in mind that that's why we made the effort to get so specific, because when other people were interpreting the existing policy, this is where these children felt that they couldn't celebrate who they are. And I know that a lot of people don't see it this way, but your graduation, yes, it is a tradition, but in reality, we are not all the same. We are not all going to dress the same. We're not going to all celebrate the same. And there is so much pride that these children carry that they're not being able to express. I don't think any of you know what it's like to have to sneak your culture in somewhere. That's not fair to any child. And the fact that that's how it is now is not okay. So while having a simpler policy is perfectly fine, but we need to do something either with the staff, administration, for them to know that these things are allowed and no child should have to sneak their culture in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Okay, let me move her. Sorry. So I'd like to get some closure here, because I think we've gone around a couple of times. We've heard some. George, I'm going to give you the floor, and then Donna has her hand up. But at this point, I'd like to kind of circle back, because we have a motion on the table, and then we also have a couple of suggestions by a number of committee members. So I'd like to kind of circle back around. George, you have the floor, and then Donna.
A quick question. Was the Narragansett tribe consulted about these proposed changes?
George, I believe, yes, it's part of the anti-racism task force. There were some members that spoke just now that are part of the Narragansett tribe. So yes, they were.
Were the leaders of the tribe consulted?
I don't know if that question is someone on that could answer that for Mr. Abbott.
Yes, Thon can speak to that. Point of order.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Macaruso. Dawn can speak to that?
He has his hand raised.
Oh, he does. Okay. Dawn does? Okay. Thank you. I see it. Thank you, Lisa. Dawn, there's a question about whether or not you were consulted or the. Go ahead.
Yes, so actually, we have spoken about this many times within what our tribal, we call it a JOM committee, Johnson O'Malley funding for schools. we have regular meetings, and that's where the idea of the stove, because so few of our youth were graduating high school. That is something that another way in which we wanted to honor them as a tribal community was with the stove. So yes, I have consulted with head of our education department, Chief Sachem, who works with her closely. I haven't spoken with him directly, but she works closely with him. And and just as a tribal community, these are constant conversations that we have been having and how to do that. So I have been speaking and in communication with tribal leaderships, and Donis also is married to tribal council member Cassius Spears. So yes, our tribal government has been informed and is aware of our position here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you for speaking. Donna and then Ryan. Donna, you have the floor.
This is a long conversation, but I am hearing so much compelling case and situation for saying yes to honoring the indigenous examples of why they should be allowed to wear the eagle feathers and the beaded stole. It sounds to me, just based on what Thorne just said, that is granted from the tribe, just like we grant and issue the stole for the National Honor Society. Everybody can't just wear it. So I would suggest, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but Andrea, you were concerned that you would be responsible to have to monitor all of the different things. And Gina, you too, but would you two be willing to say, at least for this graduation, if people would like to wear their feathers, they would not be removed by anybody on the faculty. They would not be taken from them, and the same with the stoles. And make that kind of effort to reach out to correct some of the wrongs that have been done in the past.
Yeah, I think the concern overall would have been if we had 300 graduates that had to be approval, the managing of that would be insurmountable. You could think about it similar as we do the Honor Society, where there's a list of names presented, during that time, and then specifically who has the permission to receive the stole.
Mm-hmm.
But to John's point, I think it gets into, well, what about me when you look at C, and I don't profess to be an expert in cultural religious significance in any way. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Andrea, that we wouldn't want to do anything that would be offensive to anyone. So
no, of course not. Yeah. But I mean, if I wear my cross at graduation, because that's my outward expression of celebrating, nobody's going to take that from me. So
right, there is that we would.
Yeah. So I would suggest that we certainly allow for that to be exercised at this graduation, that anyone that has earned feathers or stoles can participate with those displays. Anybody with a Confederate flag, take the flag off, because that's not an earned thing.
I think speaking even with Ms. McKenzie, Ms. Spas, we had because I've been at the task force at the meetings when they've had conversations regarding graduation and the story, some of which you've heard tonight. I know with Mr. McKenzie, in his 9 years, he has said he's always allowed, but I don't know if there was a staff member in the back that he is not aware of. That's what happens. He's leading a ceremony, so you don't know everything that happens with a specific staff member. So my understanding from the task force was the policy was very old. I agree with Andrea about the gender shifts, because we're making those shifts now in our own dress code policies and our behavior codes, doing this very similar conversation. But I do know that the thinking was maybe less is more. Like maybe it's not as specific, so you don't get into the
Right,
have and the have
right.
not.
But you could communicate to the staff and to the graduates that, or at least to the staff, not to remove anything that the student is wearing. That's number one, and I'm aghast that somebody would take those feathers, okay? That's number one. And the second thing is you can communicate to the graduates that they have to come to that graduation with dignity. And part of their dignity, if they're an Indigenous member, would be to have a stole on. That's part of their dignity. So anyway, I'm going to be quiet because this has been talked about enough, but I am still in support of allowing this. Yeah.
Okay. Ryan, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think John's suggestion is probably the best course of action in this case, which is let's set up an additional school committee meeting between now and graduation, give John direction, which I think he's heard a lot, which is basically we're looking more for a celebration. We're not looking to have restrictions upon the students. We've cleaned up the attire language and the gendered language. I think everybody was in favor of that. Let's pick a date offline, get at least 7 of us together and look at the new language. I can't support it as it is.
I can't
and
either.
Specifically because we're going to have Gina in a bad position. And so I would much rather see cleaned up language. John says he can do it in time. We can all commit to getting back together. I think we all have, support in that space. So either abandon the policy altogether for this year, which I don't think I'm super in favor of, but more in favor of than what's on the table today. So that's what I would recommend. We vote against the adoption of the policy tonight. We table it. We instruct John to come back with cleaned up language. He's heard from everybody, and I haven't heard a lot of opposition to it. So we just have another meeting with only this topic, hopefully a bit shorter meeting, and then we approve it and move on. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Gary, you're all set? Okay, so there's been a suggestion from Ryan that we allow John to have his 7 days to formulate a policy that we'd all be comfortable with. Do we want to move Mr. Ligori's motion forward to a vote? And then I'm looking for, I guess I'm going to move Mr. Ligori's motion to a vote. As far as you want to reiterate that, Mr. Ligori, as far as what you wanted to keep.
My
and then
motion
amend?
was to accept the policy as is without item E.
Without item E, okay.
And
there was
there was a change of one word from provided to suggested in item E.
Suggest. Thank you. And Donna, you second that, right? At the time?
No, I think Linda McAllister did.
Oh, that's
Thank
right.
you very much, Gary. Linda McAllister did. Donna, well,
Yeah. Can we move the motion? Can't we just move it to another meeting? We don't have to vote?
well, no, we have to make a decision on the motion on the floor. We have to make a decision. So either we have to say, yeah, we vote on it, and then we either those in favor, those against, those recuse, whatever, and then we make then we vote. And I'm sorry, John?
Yeah, you could also,
Table.
someone can make a motion simply to table this for tonight, and we'll have a special meeting.
So we don't have to close we don't have to.
No, the closing is the motion to table, and then there is
Okay.
a vote on the motion to table.
Thank you, John. That's new information I'm learning every day. Okay, so Donna?
Yes, I make a motion to table this until John can change the language and we can revisit it at that special meeting. Yeah.
Okay, a second. I got a second from Mr. Luzon. Lisa, you have a comment open for discussion on this vote? I can't hear you.
Is that allowed on a table?
Well, no, yeah, because there's another motion to table it, so now we can open.
Recommendation was 7 before graduation, and John invited certain members. I insist that policy is not crafted for them without them.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
members of the tribe there will be no quorum, right? Need to be part of that conversation. And I absolutely insist that we take that as a practice. And it needs to be known when this policy comes back in 7 days that they were included in a policy for them.
Is there a discussion on tabling a motion? I don't think there's discussion.
There isn't. There
Oh, I'm
isn't.
sorry. There isn't a discussion. Okay, thank you. The point of, you should have done point of whatever. Okay, so I'm sorry, Lisa, there's no discussion on a motion to table. So we are tabling this motion until the time that John will provide us with the new policy, and we will have a special meeting to vote on it.
You got to vote.
We have to vote.
Yeah,
on
no,
this
I
one, Chair.
understand. I just kind of reiterate what we're doing. Okay, those in favor of tabling the motion until the later date? Aye. Any against? Any recusals or abstentions? Okay, it looks like the motion is passed. Thank you very much. That was a great conversation.
Linda, can you tell me, did it pass unanimously? Because I
Yes,
don't.
yes, it did.
Yes. Okay,
Yes, it
thank
did.
you.
You're welcome. Sorry, Donna. Okay. And thank you, the public, for joining in. That's all very good information for us to consider. Okay, we're on to business. Ms. Picard.
Okay, so, and we're updating and the approval of the school improvement teams. Attached is a list of the school improvement teams for each building. Per the policy created by the school committee, you shall review the membership composition of each sit. Should you determine that the membership selected by the school is not representative, you shall direct the principal to reopen the application process and appoint additional members to achieve proper representation. I do recommend the approval of this list of members for each building as presented, as they have followed the policy criteria.
So moved.
Okay, the superintendent made a motion to approve the list of SIT members. Mr. Luzon made the motion and Donna seconded it. Any discussion on the matter? Mr. Day?
Yes, I noticed on the second page that Mr. McKenzie is still listed as principal for the high school, so that should be corrected before we vote on this.
Well, he's technically still the
principal. Yeah.
He's technically still the principal, Mr. Day, at this point.
He's going to be principal less than a month. So, all right.
Ms. Picard, am I correct in that statement? Thank you. Okay, Mr. Yes.
We appointed Andrea principal. She was appointed principal and when he's leaving, so.
Okay.
I've been wrong before.
Would you feel better if we came back after it was changed? Sorry. Okay, Mr. Luzon, you had your hand raised, sir.
I think this is awesome. Looking at Charlestown, it seems like we have half the town on the, but I think I'm just so glad we have so much of the community participating. So I just want to make that comment. I just think it's great.
Thank you for your input. Any other school committee member have any questions or? Okay, well, I'll take this to a vote. So those in favor of approving the members of the SIC committee as proposed? Okay, any opposed? Recusals, abstentions? Mr. Day, you?
I voted for it.
I'm sorry, thank you. That was unanimous, Donna. Thank you. Okay, letter B, Gina.
So this is the approval of the consolidated resource plan. I recommend approval to submit the CRP, which includes Title I, Title II, Title IV, and IDEA dollars. Jane is available for any additional questions. As is typical, I've included the budget pages that you've received in the past. If you are interested in the grant backup, we can absolutely send you the entire grant application.
So moved.
Thank you, Ryan. The superintendent recommended that we approve the CRP. It was the motion was made by Mr. Luzon, seconded by Mr. Callahan. This is now open for discussion. Any questions from Ms. Picard or? I don't see any. Okay, I'll move this to a vote. Those in favor of accepting the CRP as presented by the superintendent? Thank you. Anyone opposed? Recusal or abstentions? Abstentions or recusal? Again, that vote was passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Letter C.
So this is the agreement with the Rhode Island Student Assistance Services. I recommend approval per the memo from Ned Draper dated May 25th, 2021 of the agreement with Rhode Island Student Assistance Services for substance abuse prevention. This was also reviewed by legal counsel.
So moved.
May I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Callahan. There was a motion, I'm sorry, recommended by superintendent to approve the memo with the agreement with Rhode Island Student Assistance Services. Motion was made by Mr. Luzon, seconded by Mr. Callahan. This is now open for discussion, questions. Anything for Mr. Draper, Ms. Picard, or Ms. Staley? No, okay, I'll move it to a vote. Those in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Recusals? No, okay, Donna, that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Letter D.
So there's a memorandum of understanding in your packet between the Charahoe Regional School District and the town of Richmond pertaining to the funding of the school resource officer. I recommend approval of the memorandum of understanding between the Charahoe Regional School District and the town of Richmond pertaining to the funding of the school resource officer. This was also reviewed by legal counsel.
So moved.
Okay, there's a recommendation to fund the MOA to fund the school resource officer. A motion was made by Mr. Luzon to accept it, seconded by Ryan Callahan. This is now open for discussion, questions. Anybody? I think that's pretty okay. Well, I'll move it to a vote. Those in favor? Those opposed? Abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Any recusals? It was a positive vote for Mr. Day, abstained, Donna. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to letter E.
So this is school committee rules of conduct. The item was requested by 3 school committee members, Donna Chambers for an overview and a review of the rules of conduct, Catherine Juicy for clarification on public forum, and David Stoll as it relates to agenda development.
Okay. Do we, is John going to review this with us or do we? Yep. Okay.
John is here.
Thank you, John.
Hi, give me a second so I can pull them up. One moment, please. While I'm tracking down the rules themselves, perhaps you might want to go to another agenda item and come back to me.
Sure. We could give yes. You want to do? Can we do that without a motion?
Actually,
you just found it. Okay.
I just found them.
Good.
The people, I think it's very healthy that we have this item on the agenda today, tonight, to remind both the public and the school committee that the school committee has rules of conduct, and the rules of conduct are essentially a set of bylaws. We don't call them the bylaws. Other districts call them their bylaws, but they work that way for us. And as you can see at the bottom of the second page, they have been reviewed periodically by the school committee, most recently in May of 2015. And what they do is they set forth ways to make meetings more efficient, and also so that people will have expectations in terms of what can, what will happen at a particular meeting. The first section of the rules of conduct talk about meeting procedures, that, your meetings will go from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and that they won't go beyond 10 o'clock, and unless there is a vote of 2/3 of the members. And Craig is the person who always makes that motion, but he does it for a reason, because it's part of your rules that if more than a third say, no, we want to stop, we want to go home, it means that you're going home for the night. It also lays out what the agenda items are. It makes it clear that the chair is to follow the Robert's Rules of Conduct. It also expressly addresses one of the issues that Mrs. Giusti raised, and that is the public forum. We have a public forum. It is part of our standing agenda items. The purpose of the public forum is to allow, since you do allow people to speak about items that are on the agenda, the purpose of the public forum is to allow the public to speak about items that are not on the agenda. When somebody speaks to an item that is not on the agenda, it's okay to have a brief response to a person. For example, to refer them to the superintendent, to say that's a great concern, we'll put it on the our next public agenda. There's no obligation to respond, but you can respond in a brief manner. The chair, though, and it's up to the chair, and I want to really reiterate this, the chair is a very important position on the Charahoe School Committee. In some districts, the chair is a very ceremonial position. You bang the gavel at meetings. The chair has a lot of responsibilities in Charahoe that include the conduct of the meeting, but they also, and we'll talk about it in a minute, talk about Mr. Stoll's issue, which is agenda setting. With regard to the public forum, though, the chair has the discretion to say, I'm limiting people to 2 to 4 minutes. It's the chair's call to do that. It also, your rules say that public forum is 30 minutes tops. Otherwise, you would not get to the rest of your business. The second section talks about agenda development, and it makes it very clear, and this goes to Mr. Stoll's issue, and that is that the superintendent, working with the chair, puts the agenda puts the agenda together. If a member wants to put something on the agenda, otherwise, they can make a request. It's one of our standing items to have school committee requests for future agenda items or legal opinions. Or they can direct a request straight to the chair through the clerk 8 days prior to a schedule. That would be a regular meeting. With regard to requests that I provide legal opinions, it requires a majority vote. I will be very candid and say that my resources are limited. There are so many hours in my day, and I reiterate that I work for the body. I work for the group. I don't work. I'm not Linda's personal lawyer. I'm not Donna's personal lawyer. I'm not Lisa's personal lawyer. I'm the lawyer for the school committee as a body. The rules of conduct also address the process for communicating externally and also in terms of requesting information. With regard to external communications, you need to make it clear, you're not speaking on behalf of the school committee, you're speaking for yourself. Getting on the school committee doesn't mean you give up your First Amendment rights, but it also doesn't give you the right to talk on behalf of the other 11 people who you serve on the school committee with. You also have the right, just like every other member of the public, to ask the superintendent for information that the superintendent would have to provide under the Access to Public Records Act. If you're asking the superintendent to do something more, however, that really needs to be put on an agenda. Again, the superintendent also has limited resources. She has, believe it or not, she also only has 24 hours in the day. And if the committee is going to ask her or her staff to, if a member is going to ask her or her staff to invest a considerable amount of time on a particular project, the committee has to ask her to do that. The rules provide that information will be provided to you at least 4 days prior to the meeting. And if it's a meeting that is scheduled for less than 1 week from the date of the request, the superintendent has until 2 days prior to the meeting to provide the information. And while we were talking about the last agenda item, or the agenda item a few ago, it is my goal that if you're going to have a meeting to try to get on Tuesday, to try to get something out to you by way of email on Saturday, and what you choose to do with it. And I will address the concern that Lisa brought up during the discussion of whether to table or not. I defer to you because, again, I work for you as a body. I believe it's the responsibility of school committee members to communicate with constituency, be that constituency being the Narragansett tribe, be that constituency the Hopkinton Town Council. I believe that that is your responsibility, but I will endeavor to give you the information ahead of time, or at least 2 days prior to the meeting that you agree upon next week to discuss that policy. I want to reiterate what the Attorney General has said to you earlier, that you are subject to the open meetings law, and that means that you cannot use email to circumvent the law. In other words, you can't put together an email chain where you all discuss school business and you end up making school decisions without the public's involvement by using email. The superintendent, when she needs to, she will email to you. You may request reimbursement for mileage or conferences that are addressed to the chair, but on the other hand, if there is anything that costs more than $75, the whole school committee has to approve it. If you are concerned about an employee, you are not, it's not the appropriate forum to discuss employee concerns. Employees have a right to notice and an opportunity to be heard. That's a nice legal way of saying it's not right to talk about somebody behind their back. If you are concerned about an employee performance, you hire a superintendent to run the school district. You need to bring those concerns to the superintendent and let the superintendent in the first instance address them. The superintendent is also responsible for notifying the chair if somebody is violating our rules. And it also, we have a responsible use of technology policy that applies to everybody who uses our laptops. But again, it's made very clear in your rules of conduct that you're not supposed to be using our technology for business reasons or political reasons or advertising or solicitation. Section 4 deals with ethics. You're all subject to the Rhode Island Code of Ethics. Periodically, we've had somebody from the Ethics Commission speak to you about your responsibilities under that body of law. We will be happy to arrange that again. Last but not least, you do have the authority under your rules of conduct to censure a member who has violated the rules after giving the person notice and a hearing. This is in your rules of conduct. I'll be honest with you, I frankly don't recommend rules censuring motions. I think it makes somebody into a martyr, but if you so choose to do that, there is a process laid out in the rules of conduct. You also are subject to, and it's in your packet, the Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical Standards for School Committees. This code of basic management principles is promulgated by the General Assembly, and the same code of basic management principles apply to every school committee in the state of Rhode Island. And it makes clear that your obligations are the welfare of students attending the schools. You know, this has been an issue before with this committee, where it's, you know, I'm here from Charleston. I really don't care what happens to the rest of the district. You know, the people from Charleston sent me here. And that's not why you're on the board. You owe a duty to the Charahoe Regional School Committee to act in the best interest of the school committee. And the General Assembly says the best interest of the school district is to look out for the educational welfare of the students. The Code of Basic Management also indicates that you are responsible for preparing policy, and policy has become so much more important, particularly in the last 3 years with the education reform, whereby personnel matters were frankly taken out from under school committees and transferred to superintendents. Policy and budget and picking the superintendent are the 3 big levers that you have as a school committee. And the Code of Basic Management Principles recognizes that. The Code of Basic Management Principles also, they encourage a variety of opinions. Boy, we got that earlier this evening. It talks about making public information relevant for the community, relevant public information available to the public. It reminds you that you need to listen to the recommendations of the superintendent. That does not mean that you have to agree with the superintendent. That does not mean you, I would hope that you would listen to my recommendations, and indeed I appreciate and very much that you did so tonight. At the end of the day, however, you are the school committee, and the decisions are ultimately yours to make. The Code of Basic Principles also makes it clear you need to follow agendas, that you have professional growth. You do have actually a professional development requirement of 6 hours per year. Frankly, what we are doing right now can count towards the 6 hours of professional development that you are required to do each year. It also says that you need to work with each other and you need to attend as much as possible meetings. You know, it's not right if you only show up for the quote important things. Last but not least, it provides that you strive to promote harmonious working relations. That is, at the end of the day, hopefully that everyone will pull the boat together, and even where we disagree during the process of making policy or the process of approving the budget or the process of selecting a superintendent, your 3 big powers, that if the board as a body goes in a particular direction, that all of the members of the school committee will, as much as possible, support the decision of the organization. And again, this was adopted back in 2008 when mandated by the General Assembly. It has been reviewed again periodically. Does anyone have any questions for me? I know that is an awful lot, but I think it's really helpful to remind everybody what the expectations are, and also so that you understand that when the chair says the agenda is being laid out in a certain manner, your rules provide that the chair does that. That's a power that you have given to the chair, and why the role of chair is important. Likewise, if the chair says, okay, public input has been 30 minutes, I've given people 2 minutes at a time, you can briefly respond to them, but we've spent our half hour on public input, we need to move on. The chair, again, that's the chair doing her job. It is not personal to, gee, I'd love to stay here all night and talk, about, our policy on recycling used textbooks. The chair has the right as the chair, and you should expect it from the chair, that she will keep the meetings moving by carefully setting up the agenda and by saying, okay, it's time to move to the next item. That's part of the chair's job. Any other questions? Yes, Donna.
So John, that was great. Thank you so much. I probably have not read this document since I was first appointed to the school committee. And I went through it very carefully in light of this meeting. And you've elaborated on that very nicely. What I want to say is, in the course of my experience on the school committee, there have been violations of this code. There have been a number of violations of this code. Bringing it to the attention of the chair is probably the best way to do that. You mentioned, or the superintendent from the chair. What's the chain of command? And would it be okay, for example, if a school committee member talks about an employee in a derogatory way, which we've experienced this year on this with this board, could we call that person out at the time and say, wait a minute, that's definitely against this code of conduct?
And the answer is that you can, and the way that you would do that is you would, since your rules of conduct provide for Robert's rules, you can simply say point of order. Okay. And the chair would then listen. The chair would say, Ms. Chambers, what's your point of order? And the point of order is that we have, a policy about not talking derogatorily about employees, but instead to refer matters involving employees to the superintendent in the first instance. Now, I want to make it very clear, at the end of the day, the superintendent there are three people who work for you. I work for you, the superintendent works for you, and the clerk works for you when she's doing clerk duties. Everybody else in the school department works for the superintendent. And if there's an issue with those people, if you have an issue with the principal at a particular school, you have an issue with, the cleanliness of the bathrooms in a different school, if you have an issue about not getting enough information about purchasing, you need to bring those to the superintendent in the first instance.
Okay. In light of what you said, I am going to laminate these pages and keep it with me at all meetings. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Craig, you're muted.
First of all, I'm so glad you elaborated. The superintendent's got her duties and roles, and we shouldn't be undermining her duties and roles. But I do have a question in reference to, so tell me if I'm wrong in the way I've always understood it. Towards the end of the meetings, there's usually a school committee request for future agenda items. Well, I've always interpreted that as in future means it doesn't necessarily have to be the next meeting. It could be an appropriate meeting, like I requested something that Linda and Gina are recommending that we're not going to discuss it till the fall because that's the appropriate time to be talking about it. But there's no guarantee that it's going to be the next meeting.
You are absolutely correct, because those same rules of conduct say that the chair shall set the agenda. So those two rules have to be read together. So if if everybody on the school committee said, I want on the next agenda, the menu at this school, and if every one of you came up with an idea for the next agenda, the business that is necessary to make the schools work, approving your SRO contract, approving your substance abuse counselor contract, you'd never get to those items. So it's up to the chair to structure them. And I know that the current chair, the previous chair, and chairs going back have taken that responsibility very serious, and they have done the very best that they can to herd all you cats and come up with agendas that are reasonable, so that hopefully, Craig, that you don't have to make the motion to extend beyond 10 o'clock.
Thank you very much, John.
Ryan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, John. It's a good reminder for this. I think when we have elections, we should always provide these to new committee members. I think some of the new members had complained we didn't do a good job onboarding them, and I was pleased to read through this. I like to just have one clarification on this. In the first rules of conduct 1D, it says in there, any motion to move the previous question shall not eliminate the public's right to speak as determined by the chair. My understanding of when a committee member makes a motion to move the motion, that it needs a second. There's no debate on it, and then it needs 2/3 in order to force the move. So it's unclear to me what that means in terms of having the chair having the right to eliminate the public speak or not.
Yeah, I think that essentially what that's doing is it's enshrining an exception to what you accurately described as being Robert's rules. And I think that the concern was that a previous school committee, and if you look at the teacher's contract, if you look at these rules, almost every sentence you can say there's a story behind it. And one of the stories behind this is that probably, I don't know if it was 8-10 years ago, I would defer to Bill Day that, we had an awful lot of, we don't want to hear from somebody on the school committee, so we just moved the question to, shut that person up, or we don't want to hear from certain people in the audience. So as a result of it, that rule was put in. So essentially that works as an exception to the Robert's rules. In other words, what it's trying to accomplish is not allow you as school committee members to use parliamentary procedure to shut off the public.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Thank you. And I especially like that we only get 2 bites of the apple, so to speak. It's a good reminder. I can be long-winded, so Chair, you can bar me from speaking further at your discretion.
Yeah, Catherine, your turn. You have the floor, Catherine.
Thank you. So I appreciate the recap. I think it's good for us to look at these at least once a year as we're doing this work. And I think it's important for the public to understand what our rules are. I get a lot of questions from the public saying, can you do this? Can you do that? And my answer is always no. That's just not what we do. That's not in our purview. And then I can direct them to the appropriate person. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had that experience of, can't you just please do this? So I think it's important for the public to remember that we're a policymaking board. And really it is at the heart of what we do. And so that's our charge. So I appreciate the recap. I had the question about public forum. You answered it well. I like how we handle public forum. My concern has always been that if we get into a robust conversation during a public forum, we run the risk of disenfranchising somebody who really wanted to hear that particular conversation. So I like the way that we operate with that now, but I appreciate the recap. It was very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Any other questions for John? Comments? I don't think so, John. Thank you so much again for your guidance and sage wisdom.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we're on to letter F, Ms. Picard.
So letter F is ESSER funding and next steps. And in your packet, you will see a letter from Ned that sort of gives you the overview. We did get slightly less than expected for ESSER 2. We received it probably about a week ago. We're currently working on our application due July 1. And our focus will be our curriculum materials, our technology needs, and our facilities upgrades for HVAC and COVID mitigations. As far as ESSER 3, there is a draft allocation amount, but not set in stone just yet. And Ryan is telling us that is forthcoming, and our guess is it's probably closer to July when we should see that allocation. But once we do receive it, we will be in touch and then give you the update. And if there's any other questions, we're happy to answer. We're currently working on it.
Any questions for Ned or Gina? No. Okay, thank you. I guess we can move on, Ms. Picard.
So the next is the update on the Richmond Elementary School windowsills, which it was requested by Mr. Day. I have an update. There are currently 66 windowsills at Richmond. Upon review with Jason Sullivan, Ned and the Martone Company, there was a review to replace 6 3 to 4 foot windowsills and 6 4 to 8 foot windowsills, and the remaining ones needed to be cleaned, primed, and painted to ensure preventative measures. So the replacement will cost us about $5,250, and the overall priming, painting, and cleaning off of the remainder of the windowsills to ensure the corrective action would probably, total cost will be no more than $19,110. So I'm asking for your approval to create a change order in order to move forward with that structure and to make sure we mitigate those risks regarding the windowsills at Richmond. Thank you, Mr. Day. And I know Bill wanted to add anything based on his request.
Mr. Day. Yes, Mr. Day, you have the floor.
I'm just curious, do we have a time frame on that? If we're going to have these ready by the end of summertime, or we got what's the time frame on this?
Well, we needed a change order from the school committee tonight, but after that, I think he can get it relatively, I want to say, I don't want to speak for you, Ned, but it was within a few weeks.
Well,
yeah, that's correct. Within a few weeks, he should be able to mobilize.
Well, my concern was that at one time I was told it was going to be put off till we fix the roof, and I want to make sure that's not going to happen.
No, what if the committee approves the change order, we can move on that.
Can I get the person who seconded the change order, please?
Well, I did get what, okay, I'm
Ryan?
sorry. Yes, Ryan. Yes.
Thank you.
No.
No.
Yeah, Donna moved it, and then I'll second it.
Right,
Okay.
Donna moved it and then Ryan seconded.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're open for discussion and or questions. Now, I do have a hand raised in the public. I don't know what that's regard to. I don't know. Virginia, what was your question, or what was the reason why you wanted to speak?
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Virginia Stracuzzi. I'm from Hopkinton. I actually have had my hand raised since we were talking about the, school committee ethics and
okay.
And it's
sorry,
sort of,
I must have missed it.
Yeah, that's okay. But so that interestingly, because my question, which I had my hand raised for a while in that section, and Mr. Callahan actually addressed it briefly, because one of my concerns recently is the public being allowed to speak. And so I just kind of got brushed off through 2 sections. But especially with so many hot topics being on the agenda, and I've heard in past meetings, Mr. Day, Mr. Luzon suggest that school committee members kind of get 2 chances and to speak, so we keep things moving and so that the public has a chance to speak. And I never knew if that was a real rule or if that was one of those sort of unwritten rules. Mr. Callahan did end up bringing it up, but I kept my hand raised just because I wanted to, make you guys all aware that my hand was raised and for quite a long time and I didn't get called.
I apologize. That's my fault. I take this total responsibility. It's hard to see everybody sometimes, and I apologize.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Yep. You too. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to our motion to approve the funds for the, I guess, to fix the windowsills at Richmond Elementary School. There was a motion and I guess there's no more discussion. Let's move that to a vote. Those in favor to move those funds? Looks like that's unanimous. Anybody opposed? Abstaining or recusals? Thank you. The vote was unanimous. So I have H. We had a conversation during executive session with regards to Superintendent Picard's contract for the 22-23 school year. The conversation was robust, and we all are very pleased with her performance and how she's been very proud and pleased of her performance as our new superintendent. So we would like to, I'm making a recommendation to the committee that for the 22-23 school year that we provide or give Ms. Picard a 2.5% raise to the amount of $159,013 for her 22-23 contract. Anybody?
Second.
Second, okay, I have a second. And any discussion on that or any comments?
Who made the motion, please?
I guess I did. I made the recommendation. Oh, that's not a
Who made
motion.
the recommendation, so did someone make a motion?
Yes, Ryan made the motion.
So moved.
Yep, so moved. Sorry, Ryan. Ryan made the motion and Donna seconded.
Thank you.
Sorry, Donna. Yes. Okay, any other comments? Or I didn't want to go into too much detail. I didn't know if I was allowed to, so okay. Okay, let's take this to a vote. Those in favor? Great. Any opposition or opposed? Recusals or abstentions? Nope. So it passes unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gina.
Everyone, I appreciate your support, your continued support. It's been a pleasure. Okay. Next item is the discussion of in-person and virtual meetings. This item was on the agenda at the request of David Stahl and Mr. Day. And just some updates. We are still, the equipment is trickling in. I'm sure many of you know with COVID, the delivery comes in dribs and drabs. But Sean Cole does believe that we can make the attempt to begin as early as the end of June meeting. It may not be without its glitches as we, get back into the world of if we're doing, especially if the executive order stands that we have to run the virtual and in person simultaneously. So we'll have to work out some of that, but he does think that he could be up and running that equipment for June 22nd.
Any questions? Mr. Day? You're muted, sir.
So my understanding is that the 22nd of June we'll be at the library at the high school. Then
That would be the plan.
Well, I think that this would go a long ways towards maybe getting some more civility into the way that the members are working amongst themselves there, because we just needed a refresher on our policies and procedures as school committee members. So I think this will go a long way towards that, and hopefully everyone can see fit to meet us there on the 22nd of June.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Abbott, you have the floor.
Perennial concern of mine has been the parking for school committee members and the public at the main facility, the high school. I certainly hope that that's addressed at some point, especially if there's a sporting event running. It's some portions of the parking lot are unlit, and it's just not a good situation, but no one seems to want to address it. I brought this up many times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Anybody else have any questions about meeting in person, possibly at the end of the month or the end of June? I'm looking forward to it too. Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Picard, for that update. Okay, now we're on to consent agenda items. Does anyone want to pull items for further discussion? Items that
Madam
need to be
Chair, I
pulled?
assume we need to pull a 1, 2, and 3.
Nope, for minutes. Yes, sir. Any others that need to be pulled, Mr. Day?
H1, I have a question about this bid process there.
Okay, so you wanna pull H1 about the boiler?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other things that need to be pulled? Okay, Mr. Luzon,
Madam Chair, I make a motion to move the remainder.
can I have a say, oh, thank you, Mr. Callahan. So, yes, we make a motion to pull A1, 2, and 3 and H2 and the remainder of the items. We could move to a vote. Those in favor? Consent agenda items. Thank you. Any opposed? No. Any recusals or abstentions? Okay, that was unanimous, Donna.
Okay, Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve A1, the executive session minutes of May 11th, 2021, which was the approval of the executive session minutes of April 13th, 2021, minutes not sealed.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. There's been a motion to approve the executive session minutes of May 11th, 2021, which was the approval of exec session minutes of April 13th. A second by Mr. Callahan. Any discussion on those minutes? I guess not. Okay, those in favor? I think I need to abstain on this one. Okay. Okay, any opposed? No, I'm abstaining, Donna. I was absent that day.
I'm abstaining also.
Okay, and George was abstaining. Thank you, George. Okay, Mr.
Madam Chair,
Zahn? Mhm.
I make a motion to approve A2, the executive session minutes of May 11th, 2021, NEA ESP contract ratification, minutes unsealed.
May I have a second on that, please? Mr. Callahan, thank you. Executive session minutes of May 11th, 2021, NEA ESP contract ratification. Made a motion by Mr. Luzon, second by Mr. Callahan. Any conversation, discussion on that matter, those minutes? Okay, I'll move it to a vote. Those in favor? Okay, any opposed? Abstentions? I'm abstaining. George and I abstaining, Donna. Any recusals? No. Okay. Mr. Luzon?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve A3, the regular session minutes of May 11th, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Luzon made a motion to approve the regular session minutes of May 11th, second by Mr. Callahan. Any discussion on that matter, those minutes? No, I'll move it to a vote. Those in favor to approve the regular session minutes? Any opposed? Abstaining? I'm abstaining. Thank you, George. Any recusals? Donna, George and I abstained on those minutes.
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
yes.
I make a motion to approve H1, awarding of contracts for the boiler preventative maintenance and repair bid to Summit Heating Service, Inc. of Coventry, Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Luzon. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Luzon made a motion to approve the contract for boiler preventive maintenance repair bid to a Summit Heating Service from Coventry, Rhode Island. Ryan seconded. This is open for discussion. I believe, Mr. Day, you had some questions.
Yes, I was wondering what is it, the base bid annual boiler preventive pro. I wanted to know, is this a once a year type of thing, or is it by monthly, biannual, or what's it, how is this bid work out?
So we do an annual service each summer for the boilers within the district. In addition to that, we have on-call services when, for instance, pumps fail or something goes wrong with a boiler or a system. So it's for both types of services. That's why we have the response.
Well, I can see the hourly rate is different, and I understand. So, you know, I'm looking at the career and tech facility. They're charging us the same amount of money to do the Richmond School, Charleston School, middle school, and high school. The size of the boilers don't seem to. There's different sized boilers in these buildings, and I'm just a little confused as to how they're charging one price for for those 5 buildings there, when the boilers are significantly different sizes.
Well, what we did is included in the bid is a list of the equipment that's being serviced. And you can see in the base bid, there is some variation between some of the equipment. The elementary schools, the middle school and the high school, Richmond rather, not all the elementary schools. Richmond being the larger building shakes out along with the middle school and high school. Administration small, marine trade small, Hope Valley's a little smaller, same thing with Ashaway. So there is some variation amongst the pricing and equipment.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand is why we're being charged the same for the career and tech building, which is considerably smaller than the other 4 schools. Why isn't that you know, a little different than that? I'm confused at. I mean, Ashaway School is natural gas, so I can understand why that might be a little cheaper than Hope Valley School, but I still don't quite understand why the career and tech. That's one of those are the newest boilers we have in the district, in the career and tech building, because we transferred a few years ago from electricity, which we had there. So those boilers, I'm not saying they don't need to be serviced, but if you're comfortable with it, I guess I'll have to go along with it. But it makes no sense to me why 4 of the buildings have significantly larger boilers than the career and tech, and that's all the same price.
I think there are valid points, Committee Member Day. Based on the response and based on the service they've provided to date, I don't have any reason to discount their ability or their pricing. You know, I would recommend continuing on with them. They've been, from my understanding from Director Sullivan, they've been acceptable to the district over the course of the years that they've serviced us.
Are you mute? Bill, you're, yes, are you done, Mr. Day? Because I think you might be speaking. We can't hear you. Oh, you're good? Okay, okay. Okay, Mr. Day, okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Draper or Ms. Picard with regards to this contract? No, okay, well, there's been a motion and a second. Those in favor? Make it to a vote, thank you. Okay, any opposed? Recusal, abstentions? Any abstentions or recusals? No, okay, thank you. And that passed unanimously, Donna, thank you. Ms. Picard reports.
Okay, so we have a few subcommittee reports. The Anti-Racism Task Force met on May 18th, 2021, and it encloses a copy of the approved minutes of their May 5th, 2021 meeting. The Special Education Advisory Committee met on May 13th, and a copy of their draft minutes of this meeting are enclosed for your review. Currently, we are continuing our kindergarten enrollment. We have completed the following registrations: Ashaway's at 23, Charlestown at 32, Hope Valley is at 12, and Richmond is at 53. As many of you know, this will be an ongoing number up until we get to the first day of school, typically. So I will keep you updated on that. Spring events updates. We heard from Rido, EDOC, and RIDE today that they are updating spring event guidance. It should be in our hands by the end of this week. So once I get that, I will share it. It will be on public on RIDE's website, as always. So typically what they do is they get feedback, and then tomorrow, my understanding is they're going in front of community mitigation to get additional guidance on what measures must be followed. Any example would be prom guidance, what's required. So, but right now, if you have the prom, if there's food, they're required to have testing. If they're vaccinated, does that change anything? So little things like that, where they're going to be updating to provide us additional guidance on that work. And we have some upcoming events. Underclassmen Awards is tomorrow night. Arrival at 5:30 for a 6 o'clock start. Then we have no school on May 31st for students and staff. June 11th is our graduation. We have been in weekly planning sessions to ensure that I just need everyone to hope for no rain on that day so we can move forward. And then our last day of school is scheduled for June 23rd.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're at the point, school committee requests for future agenda items or legal opinions. Okay, we have Mr. Day and then Mr. Abbott. Mr. Day, you have the floor, sir. What was your request?
This is not a request. I just want to remind everyone that something near and dear to my heart is going to be at the middle school auditorium Friday at 8 a.m. And that's Mr. Roddy coming over there with a school safety presentation. And just wanted to restate that because I think it's probably the most important thing that we're going to be doing this school year, for my personal feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Looking forward to it. Mr. Abbott, you had your hand raised.
Let's see. Discussion of any new federal stimulus money for use in our budget or building plans.
You want a discussion or a report? Do you want just a report of what, how the
tenuous because we're anticipating that the Congress is going to approve this, but I don't want to wait too long. I'd like to get a jump on it so we have an idea of how we might use those funds as they become available.
Do we, Mr. Draper and Gina, do we understand that request?
I just want to be, so it's the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds?
That's what I was thinking too.
Yep, okay. Yeah, and we plan on continuing to update you. And like I said, for ESSER 2, the focus will be on the curriculum needs, because RIDE has 5 priorities that are in that presentation. So we have to ensure that it follows those parameters. So right now our focus will be on the COVID mitigation facilities, the technology and the curriculum, but we'll keep the committee updated.
Will building plans be included in that? Building bond proposals and things of that nature to lessen the impact on the taxpayers?
My understanding is it wouldn't be allowable, but we can double check what would, my understanding is for the buildings and facilities, it would be COVID mitigation needs.
That's in the proposed bill?
Correct. HVAC systems, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Mr. Luzon? Yes, sir. Ms. Luzon, you're muted, sir, please. Thank you.
Sorry. I
That's
just want some
okay.
information, and John's sitting right there, but I still need the permission from the majority of the school committee. Some just popped in my head the other day. With the way the SIT teams have been recreated and taken some of our responsibilities, and we don't hire individuals anymore except 1 or 2 people. I'm just curious, why do we do the pink slips?
What pink slip?
Because state law was not changed with regard to pink slips. The unions were willing to transfer power to superintendents, but they were not willing to make it easier to give out or take back pink slips.
Okay, thank you very much.
You got it answered.
Good answer.
Okay, well, any other request or? Well, I think we're ready, Mr. Luzon. You go for it.
You ready?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to adjourn.
May I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Callahan. There's been a motion to adjourn, a second by Mr. Callahan. Right, there's no discussion on that, right? That's all in favor?
I'll see you folks next week.
Yes, we'll be probably